You know that feeling, right? When you're just stuck,
Yeah.
stuck in some kind of cycle. Maybe it's anxiety that just won't quit, or like this old guilt. And you've talked about it, maybe in therapy, you've thought it through, you get it intellectually,
Yeah.
but that core feeling, that weight, it just doesn't budge.
Exactly. And that weight, well, it sticks around because the energy itself is trapped. So today, yeah, we're doing a deep dive into something called the emotional resolution protocol. It's pitched as a kind of shortcut, really.
A shortcut.
Our sources, they describe it as this super specific process. It's designed to just bypass all that mental noise,
Overthinking.
right? The chatter, and get right to resolving those deep core emotional energies, the ones that get stuck, like physically in the body, sometimes from way back, childhood even.
Okay, so our mission today sounds pretty technical then. We're going to unpack the actual mechanics, right? Understand why it supposedly works. And look at the roadblocks. You mentioned logic.
Logic is huge here. It's often the reason it fails, according to the sources.
And then, yeah, we'll get into the results of these really profound physical, somatic, even sort of energetic shifts that can happen when it works.
So we're really setting the stage to differentiate between like the story we tell ourselves about our pain
The narrative.
and the actual like energetic thing that needs releasing.
Precisely. You have to strip away all that mental stuff, that scaffolding, to get to the core physiological experience.
All right, let's jump right into that failure point then, because you said it's counterintuitive. The protocol only fails when someone just stops.
Yeah.
Stops early.
That's what the sources emphasize, yeah.
Yeah.
It's only unsuccessful when the participant themselves halts the process, usually right when things are about to shift. And this is where a really striking observation came up in the research, something about gender.
Oh, go on.
The facilitators, based on their experience, and they were clear this was their experience, they noted that the only participants who ever stopped the process midway were men.
Wait, really? Only men, never women. They stated they'd never had a woman halt the protocol before completion. Now, obviously, that's a strong claim.
As a massive generalization. Okay, does the source back that up with anything like biochemically, sociologically? Or is it just, hey, this is what I saw?
They do try to unpack it. They attribute it to a mix of things, partly neurochemistry, maybe, but mostly deep, deep societal conditioning. It's not about blaming anyone, but identifying this cultural pressure, especially on men, that just it prizes logic and reasoning way above feeling.
Right. Thinking good, feeling bad, or at least feeling is suspect.
Exactly. So when the protocol requires you to stop thinking and just feel that ingrained logical system, it can feel like a threat, like losing control.
Okay. So the facilitator challenges that logical way of understanding yourself, the way you control your world, and the mind just panics.
Pretty much. It sees this emotional release thing as chaos, as loss of control, and it just slams the brakes, shuts it down. Yeah, the source mentioned a friend, actually, did all the prep work, was totally into the protocol, right up until the facilitator questioned his logical way of seeing his life. He got uncomfortable, decided, you know what, this isn't for me, stopped the whole thing, right at the cusp of potentially resolving something, sabotaged it himself, essentially.
That ties right back into this idea of an emotional language deficit, doesn't it?
It really does.
Especially thinking about how people were raised. You mentioned the 80s specifically in the sources.
Yeah.
There was just this script, right? Don't show vulnerability.
Absolutely. The range of acceptable emotions, particularly for boys and men, was incredibly narrow.
Anger was okay, maybe? Stoicism?
Yeah, anger, especially if it led to action, or just being tough, soldiering on, but sadness, fear, shame, keep that hidden. Or maybe it was okay in like a very specific movie scene, but not in real life.
So what happens is a whole lot of people literally don't have the internal word, the language, to even know what they're feeling beyond good or bad or angry.
Precisely. They lack that nuanced vocabulary. Shame, vulnerability, deep grief. They might not even recognize those sensations when they arise.
And that becomes a huge barrier when they try this kind of work. They genuinely might not know what an energetic shift feels like.
Right. The facilitator mentioned some male clients who finished the protocol and thought they'd just done a nice, peaceful meditation.
Oh, wow.
They totally missed the point. The goal wasn't just relaxation, it was a discharge, a somatic release of stored emotion. But their mind labeled it meditation, which felt safe and familiar.
That cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
It's huge. If the mind says, this is meditation, I know this, that label itself stops the deeper non-logical shift from happening. The ego needs to categorize it to control it.
And that need for control fuels the whole rationalization thing we see so often.
Ah, yeah, where you make an emotional decision, but you dress it up in logic.
Totally. A decision driven by, say, burnout or anxiety or fear, but you explain it to yourself and others using some really sound-seeming logical argument.
The source speaker gave a personal example, didn't he? About quitting jobs.
He did, yeah. Powerful one. Realized that every single job he'd ever quit. Fundamentally, it was because he couldn't handle the stress or the pressure. The feeling was overwhelmed.
But that's not what he told his wife.
Nope. He'd always come up with these like high-minded moral reasons. Oh, the company's values don't align with mine, or they don't really care about the workers, or even I can't contribute to capitalism anymore.
So the real reason I feel overwhelmed and stressed out gets hidden behind this intellectual justification. Avoids the vulnerability of admitting, I can't cope with this. The logic is a shield.
Exactly. And you see it in pop culture, too. The sources brought up Chandler from Friends.
Oh yeah, classic example.
His whole thing was witty deflection, right? Keeping emotions at arm's length. And whenever he broke up with someone, the reason he gave was always some bizarre, almost nonsensical logical flaw.
Like the woman whose head was too big.
Yeah. Or the other one, this was brilliant. He broke up with someone because she said she didn't like the musician Yanni, but she didn't say it with enough weight.
Enough weight? What does that even mean?
Exactly. It means nothing. He suspected she secretly did like Yanni, and that somehow was a fatal flaw.
So the analysis is that these aren't real reasons at all.
Not even close. They're ridiculous, manufactured, logical excuses. They're defense mechanisms.
To avoid the actual feeling, which is what? Fear of intimacy, vulnerability.
Fear of intimacy, fear of getting attached, fear of being vulnerable, fear of potential loss. All that messy, scary stuff.
Yeah.
The logic keeps those feelings safely locked away.
Okay, so this implies that if you're facilitating this and you see someone who's really stuck in their head, really using logic as that shield, you can't just jump into the main protocol.
Correct. You need a preliminary step. You need to kind of soften them up emotionally first.
How do you do that?
It involves dedicated time just using feelings-based language, creating a really safe space where they can practice identifying raw emotion, and crucially, validating it. So the facilitator might say things like, it's okay that you feel scared right now, or, wanting to cry is perfectly normal. Let's just notice that feeling in your body.
So you're gently loosening that tight grip logic has on their emotions, getting them used to just having feelings without immediately judging or explaining them away.
That's the goal, yeah. Dissolve the need for immediate rationalization.
Okay, so once you've maybe chipped away at that logic armor a bit, what's next? The protocol itself, you said, has a kind of elegant simplicity.
It does, and that's a major strength. It boils down the absolute chaos of human emotion into just 5 core categories. 5 heavy lifters.
That sounds incredibly helpful, especially for people who maybe lack that emotional vocabulary we were talking about.
Exactly. Instead of trying to pick from, 50 different words for how they feel frustrated, irritated, disappointed, anxious, worried, they have a very short list, it reduces the overwhelm.
Right. So if someone comes in and just says, I don't know, I just feel bad or everything feels wrong, the facilitator can steer them towards one of these 5.
Sort of, but there's a crucial step first.
Yeah.
Specificity. Before you pick the core emotion, you absolutely have to define the specific issue. And critically, how it shows up now in their current life. You need a concrete target. So if they say, I'm just drowning in guilt, the facilitator has to ask.
Guilt about what specifically?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where does it hit you the hardest? Is it when you talk to your mom? Is it when you think about work, when you look at your bank account? You need the context, the specific manifestation of that energy.
Got it. Drill down past the general feeling to the actual moment-to-moment experience.
Right. Once that specific context is clear, then the participant looks at the list of 5 core emotions.
And those 5 are?
Okay, the sources list them as 1, self-loathing, that feeling of deep unworthiness, internal judgment.
Okay.
2, life is meaningless. This is that profound existential despair, feeling disconnected from joy or purpose. 3, overwhelming sadness and unresolved grief. This is tied more to specific losses or just chronic pervasive sorrow.
Makes sense.
4, emotional pain and trauma. Past victimization. This covers that stuck energy from any kind of violation, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual.
Right.
And 5, primal fear of survival. This is the bedrock stuff. Deep, fundamental anxiety, feeling unsafe, feeling threatened at a core level.
Well, wow. Okay, those are definitely foundational.
They are, and the power here is how they help translate common, often vague feelings into these specific energetic roots.
So how does that mapping work? Like you mentioned guilt earlier.
Right, so feelings like guilt, shame, feeling unworthy, the protocol almost always maps those back to self-loathing.
Why?
Because the mind loves to rationalize guilt. I feel guilty because I did X, Y, or Z, but the protocol wants to strip that because away and get to the core energy, which is often, I feel fundamentally bad about myself. It's an internal state, not just a reaction to an event.
Okay, that makes sense. What about something like loss?
Loss can be a bit trickier. It depends on the context. If the loss is tied to, say, a person dying or losing a job, something specific, it usually maps to overwhelming sadness and unresolved grief.
Okay.
But if the loss feels more profound, if it shatters your whole worldview, maybe loss of faith, loss of a lifelong dream, and it leads to this sense of what's the point of anything?
Then it might be life is meaningless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the despair has gone beyond the specific event and become existential.
Got it. And what about just general anxiety, that feeling of being constantly on edge?
Yeah, pervasive anxiety. The source gave a great example. A client who always felt this low-level, persistent edginess whenever she visited her parents. Couldn't explain why, just this tightness, this fear.
Okay, and how did that map?
After exploring her history, it was mapped to primal fear of survival.
Even though she was an adult visiting her presumably non-threatening parents.
Right, logically, she knew she was safe. But the source suggested it likely stemmed from childhood. Maybe her father used to yell unpredictably, snap suddenly. So, even though dad was older now, maybe frail, her body, her amygdala still held that memory, that stored energy of the original threat. It was a primal survival response stuck on repeat.
So the fear wasn't logical, it was somatic, stuck in the body.
Precisely. And the five-core system lets you bypass the mind's protest, this is silly, I shouldn't feel this way, and go straight to the energy. Okay, this feels like survival terror. The goal is always moving from the story to one of those 5 energetic roots the body can actually work with.
All right, so we've got the setup. We've maybe navigated the logic trap. We've identified a specific issue and mapped it to one of the 5 core emotions. Now what? This feels like where the real work begins.
It absolutely is. This is the core mechanism, the most critical part, and it rests on a fundamental, maybe even paradoxical instruction.
Okay.
The participant has to feel 2 things at the same time, a sense of peace. And that core emotion, they identify the self-loathing, the fear, whatever it is.
Hold on. Peace and fear simultaneously. How does that even work?
It sounds impossible, right? But the peace, as defined here, isn't like blissed out happiness. It's more like pure, non-reactive acceptance. It's spaciousness. It's the container.
That container.
Yeah, think of it as this calm, steady space that allows the really intense, high-energy emotion, the fear, the grief, to finally move and be felt without completely overwhelming the system.
Okay, I think I get that. So how do you cultivate that peace, especially when you're about to intentionally bring up something painful?
The facilitator actively guides them. They help the person really drop into that feeling of peace first, immerse their attention in it. There's even a little mental game suggested. Ask yourself, okay, when is this peace going to end?
Why that question?
Because it forces your attention onto the piece right here, right now. It anchors you in the present sensation of it, strengthening it before you bring in the storm, so to speak.
The storm being the core emotion.
Exactly. Because the second you consciously bring up decades of stored self-loathing or that primal fear, all your attention is going to snap right to the discomfort. It's almost inevitable.
And you'll think you lost the peace.
Bingo! The participant will almost always say, I can't feel the peace anymore. It's gone. I lost it.
But did they?
According to the source material's definition, no. This is where it gets a bit, well, metaphysical maybe. It defines peace with a capital P as the fundamental energy of the universe.
Whoa, okay.
And the argument is you can't lose the fundamental energy of the universe. If you could, existence itself would just stop.
So if you feel like you lost the peace.
It just means your attention got completely hijacked by the other, feeling the fear, the anxiety. It's a distraction, a shift in focus, not an actual disappearance of the underlying peace.
So the solution is?
Simple, but not easy. Gently, without judging yourself, redirect your attention back. Back to that spacious, calm, non-reactive energy. Find the peace again, even if it feels faint underneath the storm.
Okay. But there's a potential pitfall here too, right?
Yeah.
Using the peace to avoid the feeling.
Yes. Huge danger. Denial. The participant can't use the peace state as a way to suppress or numb the uncomfortable emotion. That's the ego, the logical mind, sneaking back in.
Using a spiritual concept to bypass the actual work.
Exactly. The source had a perfect example. A male client working on victimization. His mind kept trying to just feel peace so he wouldn't have to feel like a victim.
Why?
Because he had this core belief. Being a victim means I'm weak, so he was stuck in his head. I must not feel weak, therefore I must not feel victimized, I must just feel peace. It was a thought loop, not feeling.
He wasn't allowing the energy of victimization to just exist within the peace container. He was trying to use peace to annihilate it based on a judgment.
Precisely. The facilitator had to really work to break through that judgment. It's okay to feel victimized right now. It's just energy. Let it be here with the peace.
Okay, so assuming you've got that delicate balance piece and the core emotion held simultaneously without denial, what's the next step to actually resolve it?
This is where the facilitator asks the big question. When was the first time you felt this? Going back to the origin point.
Exactly. Trying to access the original moment, often in childhood, when the mind first encountered this overwhelming feeling, decided, nope, too scary, and pushed it down, suppressing it into the body where it got stuck.
And what's the main obstacle when people try to access that? Is it the feeling itself being too intense?
Sometimes, but more often, it's the story. The mind throws up a narrative, a justification, a memory, like a manhole cover, keeping the raw, pure sensation tamped down.
The logic shield again?
Always. The logical story is the defense against the overwhelming energy. The facilitator's main job here is just relentless insistence. Focus only on the sensation. Where is it in your body? What does it feel like? Not the story around it.
The source had a really vivid example of this, didn't it? The self-loathing client.
Oh yeah, that was intense. Client working on deep self-loathing. Facilitator asks him to feel the raw sensation. What does he do?
Starts telling a story.
Immediately launches into this dramatic memory involving, quote, prostitutes and cocaine in Singapore.
Yeah.
Very self-incriminating, very shocking. But it wasn't the feeling.
It was pure distraction. It's an emotionally charged story for sure, but it's still a story. It lets the mind stay busy judging itself, see what a bad person I am, which is actually a familiar, almost comfortable form of suffering compared to the raw, nonverbal terror of the core feeling.
So the facilitator has to cut through that.
Gently but firmly. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Now, put the story to the side, just for now. Where is the feeling of self-loathing in your body? Is it in your chest, your gut? What's the physical sensation? The story is noise. The feeling is the signal.
This whole process sounds like it reframes what trauma even is.
It really does. Trauma in this model isn't just the bad thing that happened. It's an emotional energy cycle that got started by that event but was interrupted, frozen, stopped up in the body.
And it just stays there
Yeah.
for years, decades.
Yep. Dormant energy causing all sorts of background chaos. This protocol is basically just helping the body finally complete that interrupted cycle in a safe, held environment.
Okay, but what if the trauma is really significant, like clinical PTSD? This sounds like it could be overwhelming.
Absolutely. And the guidance is clear. If you're dealing with heavy trauma, you must approach it gently. Bring the emotion up in small doses, little bits and parts.
Titration, they call it in somatic work sometimes.
Exactly. Feel a small wave of it, process that within the piece, then consciously pull back into the piece to regulate before bringing up the next bit. Avoid flooding the system.
And using video, like Zoom, helps the facilitator monitor this.
I think preferred, yeah. So the facilitator can see the person's face, their body language, and guide them if they start getting overwhelmed. And crucially, remind them to keep the body relaxed.
Relaxed. Even when feeling intense fear.
Especially then. The body must be relaxed for the energy to move. Notice the clenched jaw, the tight shoulders, the shallow breathing, the headache starting. And consciously relax it. Slow, deep breaths. Get the body into that receptive parasympathetic state. That's when the stuck cycle can finally unwind and complete. So let's say you've done it. You've held the peace, you've accessed the core emotion, the self-loathing, the fear, you've bypassed the story, kept the body relaxed, and that energy starts to move, starts to process. What happens next?
Is that the end? Does it just disappear?
Not usually. What very often arises next as that primary emotion starts to dissolve is grief. A profound sense of grief.
Grief. Grief for what? The original trauma.
Sometimes, but often it's something else. The source describes it as mourning the person that you were.
Mourning your old self?
Yeah. The identity that was built around that stuck emotion. If you spent 30 years defining yourself, even subconsciously, as the person who carries his dump shame or the person who is always afraid, when that shame energy or fear energy actually leaves your system, that old version of you effectively dies.
Wow, that's a powerful idea.
It is. And the tears, the sadness that comes up then, it's often this intuitive emotional cry for the loss of that familiar, albeit painful, identity. It's making space for the new, lighter self to emerge.
Okay, so the core emotion process is maybe grief follows. Is the work done then?
Almost. There's one more crucial step, according to the sources, to make the change stick. To stop the thinking mind from just rebuilding the old pattern later on.
Because the mind likes familiar patterns, even painful ones.
Exactly. Patterns feel safe, predictable, so you have to address the thought pattern associated with the emotion too. Integrate it.
How do you integrate a negative thought pattern?
You go straight for the jugular, the
Yeah.
absolute worst case scenario.
Seriously.
Seriously, the facilitator guides the client.
Hmm.
Bring up the original problem again. Now, imagine the absolute worst possible outcome. What's the most terrifying way this could play out?
Give me an example.
Okay, say the core issue was fear of failure at work, mapped to primal fear. The worst case scenario thought might be, I'll mess up completely, get fired, lose my house, my family will leave me, I'll end up homeless, sick, alone, and die miserably. Like, really take it to the absolute limit of the fear.
That sounds awful. Why do that?
Because you hold that terrifying thought, that whole catastrophic narrative, while simultaneously staying deep, deep in the feeling of peace. You hold both until the thought generates zero emotional charge, until you are completely, utterly calm while contemplating your worst nightmare.
How is it possible?
The goal is to connect with what the sources sometimes call your godliness, that core part of your consciousness that is pure awareness, pure acceptance. Unlike your ego mind, which freaks out and judges the thought, this deeper awareness just observes. It accepts every thought, every feeling without reaction.
So you're basically teaching your nervous system that even the thought of the worst case scenario is not itself a threat.
Precisely. Once your system can hold that thought and remain completely calm, the thought pattern loses its power. It's defanged. It can't trigger that emotional spiral anymore because the fear associated with it has been fully accepted and integrated into the piece.
Okay, wow. So that's the full resolution. Emotion processed, thought integrated. How do you know it worked? How do you test it?
Couple of ways. One is similar to other somatic therapies, checking the SUD's level.
Subjective units of distress.
Yep, usually 0 to 10. How disturbing is this now?
Yeah.
So the facilitator asks the client, okay, bring up that original issue again, the Singapore memory, the fear of your parents, whatever it was. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much distress does that thought cause you now?
And the goal is?
0. Or maybe a 1. A feeling of complete calm, neutrality, or even just distance, like looking at an old photograph that doesn't trigger you anymore.
And you mentioned it's visible, too.
Oh, definitely. Especially observing via video, when that real shift, that release happens, the change in the person's face is often dramatic.
Also,
The muscles just soften. The jaw unclenches. The forehead smooths out. The eyes seem to widen and clear up. They look relaxed in a way they didn't before. The source used the phrase, they look like they went to Woodstock.
huh. Okay. Like a sudden wave of peace washed over them.
Exactly. That deep, expansive sense of well-being. It's palpable.
And then,
Yeah.
sometimes things get physical after the emotional release.
Frequently, yeah. And sometimes quite intensely. This is the body literally expelling the stored energy. It confirms this isn't just a mental shift, it's deeply somatic.
What kind of physical releases are we talking about?
It can be a whole range. Things like sudden headaches or uncontrollable shaking or trembling as the nervous system resets. Throbbing sensations, maybe heart palpitations for a bit.
Okay, that sounds like standard nervous system release.
Right. But then there are the more dramatic ones, the sources detailed, involving the body's quickest ways to detoxify and expel stuff.
Such as?
Specifically mentioned were things like sudden, urgent diarrhea, or feeling nauseous and actually vomiting.
Seriously?
Yep. Or a massive release of mucus, feeling like you suddenly came down with a heavy cold or flu, tons of sinus drainage.
Wow. So the body is literally purging.
That's the interpretation. Purging the stored stress hormones, the chemical residues, the literal physical imprint of years of holding that controlling, anxious, or fearful energy.
So if this happens to you after a session, you shouldn't freak out.
According to the sources, no, it's actually a good sign. It means the body is completing the process, physically letting go of the energetic gunk you just released emotionally. It's an expulsion, not a malfunction.
Okay, this sounds incredibly powerful, but also intense. Is this like a one-and-done thing? You do a session, purge some demons, maybe throw up, and you're cured.
Huh. If only. No, it's really important to manage expectations here. Resolving these deep core emotions is almost always a process, not a single event. The speaker in the source material shared his own journey. It took about a year and a half.
A year and a half.
Yeah. With like major breakthrough resolution sessions happening sometimes, but interspersed with months of just daily practice, consistent work. It takes time to unravel this stuff.
And the effects, are they global? Like you resolve self-loathing and suddenly your whole life is perfect.
Not necessarily. The shifts are often very topic-specific initially,
Yeah.
meaning you target one specific manifestation of that core emotion. Say, you work on the anxiety you feel when talking about money with your spouse. You might resolve that specific anxiety completely,
Okay.
but you might still feel anxious about public speaking or about your health, so the client might even report back, I don't feel that different overall.
But then they realize,
But then they realize, oh, wait, we had that big budget talk last night, and I wasn't anxious at all. We didn't argue. This specific issue they targeted resolved, even if universal bliss hasn't arrived yet.
that makes sense, piece by piece.
Exactly. And this leads into some of the really fascinating, almost weird side effects that the sources describe, these external shifts.
External shifts. How so?
When someone successfully shifts a core piece of their internal energy, it seems to ripple outwards. Their energetic broadcast changes, and the external world responds, sometimes incredibly quickly and unexpectedly.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Examples.
The sources had some great ones. There was a client who resolved this deep guilt she had about always saying no when relatives asked for help. She was scared she'd mess up and feel more guilty.
Right.
Within 2 hours of finishing the session where she resolved that guilt, 3 different relatives texted her asking for help with something.
Whoa, just like that.
Just like that. The interpretation, her energy shifted. She went from broadcasting fearful boundary, stay away, to calm, accessible. And the external world, her relatives picked up on it instantly.
That's wild. Any others?
Yeah, another one. Someone had this coworker who was always really standoffish, kept her distance. Client does a session, resolves some internal issue.
And the next day at work.
Immediately after the session, apparently, the coworker just walks over, sits down next to her, and starts sharing all this super personal stuff about her life out of the blue.
Because the client's internal energy felt more welcoming.
That's the idea. The client's internal space shifted, became more open, and the coworker unconsciously sensed it and responded.
Okay, one more. These are fascinating.
The most immediate one was a teenager. She was working on her nervousness about asking her mom about taking more dance lessons, felt really anxious about it.
Okay.
She does the process, feels the shift, and verbally says to the facilitator, okay, I feel calm now. I think I'm ready to talk to my mom. The instant those words left her mouth,
Don't tell me.
her mother walked into the room, had been somewhere else in the house entirely. Boom.
Okay, that's almost spooky. The timing.
It suggests these energy shifts can literally affect the timing and flow of events around us. It's pretty mind-bending stuff.
But it's not always positive external shifts, is it?
Yeah.
You mentioned something about a paradox.
Ah, yes. The post-peace paradox. This was a really interesting observation. About 50% of people, after a major internal resolution, a really big shift, report that something external goes kind of nuts soon after.
Nuts how?
Within days, or maybe a few weeks, something challenging pops up. A child suddenly has a major crisis, or there's an unexpected financial hit, a big problem at work. Some kind of external chaos erupts.
Wait, so you find inner peace and the universe throws a curveball?
Yeah.
That seems unfair.
Right. But the interpretation flips it. It's seen as potentially benevolent.
Benevolent chaos. How?
The idea is maybe the universe or God or higher consciousness, whatever your framework is, knew that this difficult external event needed to happen for the person's growth or soul path.
Okay.
And it also knew the person couldn't handle it in their previous emotional state. So the internal resolution, the newfound peace, was actually preparation. It had to happen first so that they'd have the inner stability to navigate the external challenge without completely falling apart.
So the inner work made them ready for the necessary storm. The chaos wasn't punishment for the peace. The peace was prep for the chaos.
That's the perspective offered, yeah. It prevents what might have otherwise been a total disaster. It suggests maybe some challenges are just waiting in the wings until we're actually equipped to handle them.
That reframes things significantly. Okay, shifting gears slightly. What about the person guiding this? The facilitator. This sounds like heavy work to hold space for.
Immensely heavy. And the sources are adamant. The facilitator must have done their own deep work. Thoroughly.
Meaning?
meaning they have to have explored the absolute depths of their own core emotions, faced their own self-loathing, their own primal fears, their own grief, left no stone unturned, as the saying goes.
Why is that so crucial?
Because when a client is terrified, truly gripped by primal fear, the facilitator needs to be able to sit there completely calm and convey, I know this feeling, I've been here, it's okay, it can be processed. They need that certainty that comes from lived experience, not just book knowledge. They have to be an unwavering anchor in the client's storm.
If the facilitator still has their own unresolved fear, they'll get triggered by the client's fear.
Exactly. Or they'll subtly try to rush the client through it because they are uncomfortable. You have to be completely clear yourself to hold that space effectively.
And does doing this work change how you see everyday conflicts?
Profoundly, according to the source. You start seeing things differently, like watching coworkers argue in a meeting.
You stop seeing it as just a logical disagreement about strategy.
You see right through it. You see the emotional undercurrent. It's not about the budget numbers. It's about someone's fear of being wrong or fear of being disrespected or fear of losing control, all masked by logical arguments.
So you see the core emotion driving the rational debate.
Pretty much. Fear, self-loathing, sadness, playing out under the surface of everyday interactions.
Okay, so wrapping this specific protocol up,
Yeah.
is there a more technical term for this kind of work?
Yeah, the sources suggest fitting it under the umbrella of somatic bodily energy release, or perhaps aligning it with principles of somatic experiencing.
What are those terms?
Because they really emphasize that this isn't just talk therapy or mindset work. It's about recognizing emotions as energy, as physiological processes in the body that are designed to move and complete. It's about releasing that energy somatically. Hashtag outro.
Wow, okay, we have covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
Really technical, deep stuff from that whole logic trap idea.
And why it trips people up, especially maybe men due to conditioning.
Right, through the simplicity of those 5 core emotions as a framework.
Self-loathing, meaninglessness, grief, trauma, primal fear.
And then into the core mechanism itself, that really delicate dance of feeling peace and the difficult emotions simultaneously, without using the peace to deny the feeling.
And getting past the story to the raw sensation, letting the body complete its cycle.
Plus the integration of the worst-case scenario thought, the SUDs check, the visible shifts, and even those surprising physical releases.
Yeah, the shaking, the digestive stuff, the body letting go.
And finally, those incredible real-world effects, the specific topic resolution, the almost spooky energetic shifts in external reality, and that post-peace paradox of chaos, sometimes following calm.
It's a rich, complex picture.
So for you listening, the really key takeaway here seems to be this. Those big, tangled, decade-long emotional knots. At their root, they might just be relatively simple, trapped energy cycles in your body.
Cycles waiting to complete.
And the way to complete them isn't necessarily more thinking or more talking, but by getting past the mental story, accessing the raw physical sensation, and holding it within that container of non-reactive peace.
It's a fundamentally different approach for many people.
Definitely. Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over.
Okay.
Given that observation, that startlingly consistent report that external chaos or challenge often follows a major internal shift.
The post-peace paradox.
Right. Consider this. Could our resistance, maybe our deep subconscious resistance to finally resolving our core emotional baggage,
Yeah.
could it actually be a kind of self-protection?
Protecting ourselves from what?
Protecting ourselves from the necessary, maybe difficult, but ultimately growth-inducing external events that our internal shift might inevitably call forth. Like, are we subconsciously keeping ourselves stuck to avoid the challenges that peace might unleash?
Are we avoiding the resolution because we sense on some level that it will require us to step up to a bigger game in life, face things we don't feel ready for?
Exactly. What major life change, what necessary challenge might be waiting just on the other side of your deepest emotional release? Something to think about.